Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Elizabeth Clark. I'm the manager over the URA Applications Review Team in Managed Care Quality Assurance. And thank you so much for joining us today for the URA Application Tips webinar. The Managed Care Quality Assurance, also known as MCQA, Utilization Review Agent Applications Team, licenses and regulates Texas Utilization Review Agents to ensure compliance with Texas Insurance Code, also known as TIC, Chapters 4201 and 1305, and Texas Administrative Code, also known as TAC, Chapter 10, Subchapter F for Workers' Compensation, and Chapter 19, Subchapters R for Health and U for Workers' Compensation. The URA application process is an important part of licensing and regulation as it facilitates delivery of the required information within the necessary deadlines based on the type of application being submitted. Let's define Utilization Review Agent and related terms. TIC Section 4201.002, 13 through 15 provides definitions related to utilization review. Utilization review includes a system for prospective, concurrent, or retrospective review of the medical necessity and appropriateness of healthcare services, and a system for prospective, concurrent, or retrospective review to determine the experimental or investigational nature of healthcare services. The term does not include a review in response to an elective request for clarification of coverage. For example, if an enrollee calls his insurance company to confirm if he still has coverage, that action and the insurance company's response to that action are not considered part of the utilization review process. In a contrasting example, if a provider requests pre-authorization to conduct an inpatient surgery for an enrollee, and the enrollee's insurance plan approves that request, that process is considered utilization review. Utilization Review Agent means an entity that conducts utilization review for an employer with employees in this state who are covered under a health benefit plan or health insurance policy, a payer, which is defined in TIC Section 4201.002.10 as an insurer that writes health insurance policies, a preferred provider organization, health maintenance organization, or self-insurance plan, or any other person or entity that provides, offers to provide, or administers hospital, outpatient, medical, or other health benefits to a person treated by a healthcare provider in this state under a policy, plan, or contract. Or an administrator holding a certificate of authority under TIC Chapter 4151, which is essentially a third-party administrator. Utilization Review Plan means the screening criteria and utilization review procedures of a utilization review agent. Let's go over some tips for the URA application form, which is TDI form number LHL005. First, always remember to use the most current version of any TDI form. Forms are updated as needed and available on our website. The same form number LHL005 is used for each type of application, but you must designate which type of application you are submitting at the top of the form. In the example shown here, you can see that the renewal box for a certified URA is checked. Note that there are distinct options for certified and registered URAs. For example, if you are a registered URA wishing to submit a renewal application, make sure you check the separate box designated for Renewal Application Registered. All fields within the URA application form should be completed, and NA should be entered if an item is truly not applicable. Make sure you do not omit these fields that are commonly overlooked on the URA application form. The official email address, which is required by 28 TAC 11302, Complete the normal business hours in both time zones in Texas. For example, you can't simply list 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, because TDI staff is not allowed to assume that you mean both time zones. You must specifically list the hours for both distinct time zones. For example, if the hours were the same in both time zones, you could state 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday for both Central and Mountain Time. Another item that is commonly overlooked on the URA application form is the NAIC Uniform Certificate of Authority Application Form number 12, which is the Uniform Consent to Service of Process form. If your URA is not domiciled in Texas, in other words, the business address you list on page 1 of the application form is not in Texas, then you must complete Form 12 and submit that as an attachment with your application. URAs are required to submit a renewal application every 2 years, and TDI must receive the completed URA application form LHL 005, exhibits, and fee no later than the expiration date of the URA's license. It's important to note that all parts of the application, including the fee, if applicable, must be received no later than the license expiration date. This is especially important to consider if you are sending your application via traditional mail, and it is why we strongly encourage submitting with your online option, as there's no mail delay with that option. If a URA submits a complete application no later than the license expiration date, then it may continue to operate until TDI renews the license. If a URA license has been expired for 90 calendar days or less, the URA may submit the complete application, but may not operate from the time the license has expired until the time TDI has issued the renewal license. And if a URA license has been expired for longer than 90 calendar days, the URA may not renew the license. Instead, the URA must obtain a new license by submitting an original application. Renewal application submission instructions can be found at our website, which you can link to from the screen here or from the web page provided at the end of this webinar. With your application, please include the following on company letterhead, signed by an authorized representative of the URA: an explanation of the intent of the submission with the URA license name and number, an attestation that the adverse determination notice template letters submitted as part of the renewal are the ones that the TDI MCQA office approved with the URA's last renewal or update application, and that the URA is currently issuing to the involved parties. And note that there is no statutory deadline for processing URA renewal applications, but our goal is to finalize them within 30 days of receipt. You may start the online URA license renewal process directly from our website through the link on the screen or the web page provided at the end of this webinar. Once you navigate to the web page, you will see instructions near the top of the page guiding you to read the applicable laws and rules and renewal instructions. Under the links for laws and rules and renewal instructions, you will then see a red Renew Online button that will allow you to start the renewal submission online. If you've never renewed online with us, it is highly recommended that you review the tutorials directly under the red button first. If your URA is domiciled in Texas, then you will review the resident license tutorial. If your URA is domiciled in a state other than Texas, you will review the non-resident license tutorial. These tutorials will give you instructions about how to navigate the first part of the renewal process that begins once you click that red button. Make sure you have all the required exhibit attachments ready before you start the online renewal process, because the online process will time out if you leave the system idle for too long. Once you complete the tutorial that applies to your URA's residency status, then you can go back and click the red Renew Online button to start the online renewal process. Follow the online system prompts to complete the process, then email your application exhibits to our application email receiver. Note that you can find our application email receiver in our contact slide at the end of this webinar. Remember that the application email receiver will not accept secure encrypted emails, so if you must send your exhibits securely, send them to our general mailbox instead, and explain in your email that you're sending the renewal exhibits subsequently to submitting your renewal online. When submitting your exhibits, make sure you follow the instructions regarding what to put in your email subject line and how to use naming conventions, because these instructions are important in supporting our system requirements, and deviating from them can cause processing delays. Please refrain from using your own naming conventions or long file names if possible, because there are character limitations, and exceeding those can also cause processing delay. Let's look at some examples of renewal application file naming conventions and discuss more why it is important to adhere to those. Keep in mind that the list you see here are some of the primary examples of what you should use, and more information can be found at our webpage. When you are creating your application files, it is important to save each designated file separately and name that file as listed under the naming convention for that file. Following these instructions exactly as suggested helps to avoid processing delays. If different or longer naming conventions are used, TDI staff will have to request you to resubmit the files correctly, or in some cases, rename the files for you. The naming conventions are very important and were created specifically to support our system's character file limitations, and also so TDI staff is able to recognize and organize the exhibits efficiently throughout the file of the application review. For example, if deficiencies are found within the personnel list in Exhibit 1 and the initial AD letter within Exhibit 2, your TDI analyst will alert you of those deficiencies via email communication and ask you to correct and resubmit those specific exhibits. You would then need to make the requested corrections to each exhibit and resubmit them via email to your analyst, ensuring that each exhibit is a separate file named according to the naming convention for that file. So you would make your revisions to each file and label each file with the naming convention file names of 1 personnel list and 2 initial AD, and then send the 2 corrected files in one email to your analyst. Labeling and submitting files correctly in this manner allows your analyst to easily upload the revised files to our system and also archive the deficient files. The components of the naming convention include the exhibit number and the name of the document. For example, for the naming convention 1 personnel list, the number 1 means Exhibit 1, and personnel list is a reference to the required personnel list document. TIC Section 4201107 requires a URA to report material changes to its license within 30 days of effective date of the change by completing an update application. Changes cannot be submitted in a renewal application. Submission instructions can be found on our webpage by scrolling to the Updates section at the link on the screen. Always include an explanation of what is changing in a cover letter on company letterhead signed by an authorized representative of the URA. The URA decides who that authorized representative is. Include the effective date of the change within your cover letter as well. You can submit update applications electronically. Make sure you read the applicable laws and rules and all update instructions. For updates, you won't use the same system that renewal applications use that includes the red action button for online submission. Instead, you will email the application with the required application exhibits to our application email receiver. Make sure you enter an email subject line as we instruct. URA update application for, and then insert your company name on the application. Make sure to use the correct designated naming conventions found in the naming convention link on our webpage. Examples of material changes include, but are not limited to, new officers and directors, changes in the organizational structure, such as a merger or acquisition, or changes to territories served. For example, if you're no longer serving Texas enrollees, but wish to keep the UR license in case that should change in the future. Also, changes in contractual relationships. For example, you may decide you want a delegated certified URA to perform the adverse determination appeal portion of UR. And changes in the utilization review plan. Another example is changes to adverse determination notices. Adding a new line of utilization review. For example, you're currently a workers' comp network URA, but you also want to add the new qualifications of workers' comp non-network and health. Please note that these types of updates will naturally be more extensive and require submission of policies and procedures, AD letters, and any other documents that support evidence of compliance with the new qualification types. Here are some extremely important points. A URA may not report a change in employer ID number, or EIN, or tax ID as a material change with an update application. And this is because a URA license is not transferable per TIC Section 4201106. This means that a URA cannot change its EIN or tax ID number and continue to use the same URA license under that new EIN or tax ID number. Instead, the URA must submit a new original application if it foresees that it will have an EIN or tax ID change, so a new URA license number can be issued to support that new business. Only report URA-related changes in a URA update application. Do not submit changes in a URA application for license types that are not related to the URA. These submissions will be rejected. For example, if your parent company holds both a third-party administrator, or TPA license, and a URA license, and the change applies to both license types, you cannot just report the change for both licenses in a URA update application. TDI manages many different license types that apply to different requirements, forms, systems, and divisions within TDI. So you must report changes for a license type based on the specific requirements for that license type and under the guidance of the specific TDI team that manages that license type. For reporting instructions for other license types, you can find helpful information from our TDI website. From the main TDI landing page at tdi.texas.gov, and also from that same page, you can choose the Companies tab under the Resources section. We also have an MCQA page that includes links for health maintenance organizations, URA, independent review organizations, or IROs, workers' compensation networks, exclusive provider benefit plans, preferred provider benefit plans, third-party administrators, or TPAs, and more. If a URA's name changes, that must be reported as a material change with an update application. Make sure you include the following with your submission, and make sure each document lists the URA's new name in full, including whether it's a DBA, LLC, etc., if applicable. a letter from the Texas Secretary of State, also known as SOS, showing that you filed the appropriate paperwork to conduct business in Texas under the EIN and name as listed in the URA application. The SOS letter is also referred to as a Certificate of Fact Status or Certificate of Status. More information can be found at the Texas Secretary of State website and selecting Certificate Verification. A letter of good standing, which is also known as the Franchise Tax Account Status, from the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. The letter or Certificate of Good Standing is also referred to as a Certificate of Account Status, which is not to be confused with Certificate of Status. More information can be found at the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts website, and the required document can be found by using the online search to find a taxpayer's franchise tax account status page. Also remember to follow your TDI analyst's guidance, as additional documentation may be required based on the specific application. If a URA has changes to officers and directors, it must report those changes with an update application. One of the items we will require to be submitted for a new officer or director is a biographical affidavit, and the URA must submit a biographical affidavit for each officer and director, even if there is a biographical affidavit on file with TDI for that officer or director under a different license type. Biographical affidavit forms can be found from our forms page, which will be provided at the end of this webinar, and then selecting NAIC Uniform Certificate of Authority application forms, and following the prompts to choose Form Number 11 NAIC Biographical Affidavit. Make sure that the URA name is listed exactly as it is licensed with TDI. Biographical affidavits that are listed under a different company name, even if it is a parent or affiliate company, will not be accepted. And note that incomplete biographical affidavits will also not be accepted. Do not omit pages or information within pages. If something is not applicable, list NA for that item. Another important item that is required in an update application when officers or directors change, or in an original application when officers or directors are reported for the first time, is a fingerprint receipt, and a fingerprint receipt will be required for each officer and director reported. These look like a common retail store receipt, but they have identification information on them that shows us the fingerprints were taken. Submit the receipts to us even if you've submitted them to other units within TDI previously, as we must account for the receipts within the system specific to our area. Do not include the hard copy fingerprint cards with the fingerprint impressions on them. These will be securely destroyed if we receive them, due to the confidential nature of those documents. Full fingerprint instructions can be linked to within our TDI URA application form number LHL005 under the Exhibit 6 section for biographical information. Here are some things that are important to know before applying to become a Texas URA. There are differences between a certified URA and a registered URA. Only a certified URA must pay an application fee. Registered URAs do not require a fee. Under TIC Chapter 4201, a certified URA may conduct utilization review for a health benefit plan or health insurance policy, a payer, or a third-party administrator. A registered URA may only perform utilization review for its own insureds or enrollees. Registered URAs are required to comply with TIC Chapter 4201 as a condition of licensure. Once you've submitted your URA original application, the fee is non-refundable. So please make sure that you are able to meet all conditions and requirements before applying, so you are not at risk of losing your fee of $2,150. Review applicability sections of the above requirements and tick and tack to make sure the URA license is necessary. TDI only regulates fully insured commercial plans, which only cover approximately 17% of Texans. For example, if an entity intended to only perform UR for self-funded ERISA plans or Medicare plans, a URA license would not be necessary. If you have questions, contact us at our general mailbox at uragrp@tdi.texas.gov and include as much detail as possible in your inquiry. You can submit original applications electronically except for the fee. At this time, TDI can only accept a fee for an original application via traditional mail. Submission instructions can be found at our webpage from the link on the screen under the How Do I Become a URA section. Make sure you read applicable laws and rules and all instructions. Email the application with the required application exhibits to our application email receiver provided at the end of this webinar. Make sure you enter an email subject line as we instruct. For example, URA original application for, and then insert your company name exactly as listed on your application. Make sure to use the correct designated naming conventions found in the naming convention link for originals. Let's look at some examples of original application file naming conventions and discuss their importance. Keep in mind that the list you see here are some of the primary examples of what you should use, but the full list and more information can be found at our webpage link that is listed at the end of this webinar. When you are creating your original application files, remember that it is important to save each designated file separately and name that file as listed under the naming convention for that file. Follow the instructions exactly as suggested to avoid processing delays, including requests for resubmissions. Please remember that the naming conventions are very important and were created specifically to support our system's character file limitations, and so TDI staff is able to recognize and organize the exhibits efficiently throughout the life of the application review. Since an original application includes much more documentation than renewal or update applications, the components of the naming conventions are a bit different than the other application types. Instead of just representing the exhibit number and the name of the document, some of the original application exhibits also have attachments within the exhibits as well. For example, for the naming convention 1A UR Standards P&P, the sequence 1A means Attachment A within Exhibit 1, and UR Standards P&P is a reference to the Required Policies and Procedures document that addresses the Utilization Review Standards. The personnel list requirement is critical, and an application will not be approved unless a personnel list is satisfactory. For all qualification types, health, specialty health, and workers' compensation network and non-network, a URA must send to TDI the full name, license type, license number, state of licensure, and qualifications of the personnel either employed or under contract to perform the utilization review. You may see 28 TAC Section 19-1706C for health and 28 TAC Section 19-2006C for workers' compensation for more details. This example here shows some acceptable entries within a personnel list that would meet the required criteria of the full name, license type, license number, state of licensure, and qualifications of the personnel. For the personnel list, Pending licenses and contracts will not be accepted. All personnel must be fully licensed in accordance with our requirements, and contracts must be fully executed, whether employed or delegated. Delegation is allowed under TIC Section 4201251. If delegated UR personnel will be used, include them in the personnel list and specify that they are delegated. Note that the personnel list for a workers' compensation URA must be comprised of Texas licensed providers only, per 28 TAC Section 19-2006A. A Texas licensed physician must oversee UR and review and approve the UR plan for a URA. Make sure that you provide a copy of the Texas license and a statement specifying the name of the Texas licensed physician who will oversee UR, and include that individual on the personnel list. You can see details specific to the license qualification type in the requirements link on the screen. For health and specialty health qualifications, you must provide evidence of acquired brain injury or ABI training, even if you do not intend to perform UR related to ABI in practical application. 28 TAC Section 19-1706E requires a URA to provide adequate training to personnel responsible for pre-certification, certification, and recertification of services or treatment relating to acquired brain injury in accordance with Insurance Code Section 1352004. The purpose of the training is to prevent denial of coverage in violation of Insurance Code Section 1352003 and to avoid confusion of medical benefits with mental health benefits. You may see 28 TAC 21-3104 for more details on ABI training, including training requirements, policies and procedures, applicable staff, and documentation of the training. To avoid delays in processing of your original application, please follow submission instructions that are stated on our webpage provided in the link on the screen under How Do I Become a Utilization Review Agent? And contact us at our general email box if you have any questions. TDI will issue or deny a complete application within 60 days of receipt. Please note that your application is not considered complete until all required exhibits and attachments are received, including the application fee. TDI does not perform a comprehensive review of the application until we consider the application complete. A comprehensive review is a comparison of the language content within the application to Texas requirements. And that 60-day statutory deadline reference can be found in 28 TAC Section 19-1704E for health and specialty health, and 28 TAC Section 19-2004E for workers' compensation. Complete the URA application form number LHL005 entirely. Enter NA if something is not applicable. All fields are required by 28 TAC Section 19-1704B1. That rule specifies that the application form is adopted by the Commissioner by reference, so completion of the form is not optional. Make sure you enter your business hours in both time zones in Texas, Central and Mountain Time. For the Agent of Service of Process in Texas section, if your company is not domiciled in Texas, do not forget to include a completed Uniform Consent to Service of Process form, and refer to the application form for instructions. Complete the certification and notary section with the notary seal. And please do not alter the pre-existing language within the certification section on page 2 of the form. Include all the requirements that are listed in the referenced links within each exhibit section in Policies and Procedures for that specific section. Do not cross-reference other areas within the application for content. For example, for Exhibit 1, Attachment B, Mental Health Process and Progress Notes, do not just include a statement that says, CUR Plan. Instead, you must include a specific P&P section dedicated to Exhibit 1, Attachment B, and include the requirements in TIC Section 4201-203 in that section. Submit evidence of all exhibit and attachment sections and the related requirements, even if you do not intend to perform that specific function in practical application. For example, even if you don't intend to perform UR for adverse determination appeals, you must still include the related exhibits and requirements. You may explain that you intend to delegate that function, but that both you and your delegate will follow all requirements and then list all the requirements for that section. Please avoid summarizing requirements when possible and include requirements in correct order as listed in the rules and statutes. Excessive summarizing and organization issues in content can lead to loss of context, which will then result in revisions. Do not just cite Texas UR rules or statutes within application documentation to replace explanation of requirements. Instead, include the full details of each requirement. For example, if 28 Tax Section 191709E makes a reference to timeframes in TIC Section 4201304, do not just state as required per TIC Section 4201304. Instead, list the timeframes and other details specified in TIC Section 4201304. It is understood that applicants must abide by federal, state, and accreditation requirements as applicable. So, to avoid possible conflicts in your content, you may find it easier to create separate policies and procedures specific to Texas, or a Texas-specific addendum to your main policies, with a disclaimer stating that the Texas addendum prevails in the event of policy conflict. Definitions for terms are not required as part of your URA application content. However, if you choose to include definitions for TDI-related terms, those definitions must match TDI's definitions exactly. Do not use alternative terms in your content. For example, when explaining requirements related to utilization review, do not use different terms for adverse determination, prospective, concurrent, retrospective, expedited appeal, pre-authorization, and so on. TDI-defined terms have distinct meanings, so using alternative terms will change the context, and revisions will then be required. When revising content, thoroughly review the entire application to make sure you have captured and revised all instances of incorrect language. Make sure that your content does not conflict. For example, even if a requirement is explained correctly in one area of the application, if it is repeated incorrectly in a different section, that incorrect section must be revised. Do not forget to include any required attachments, and please make sure you include the most current version of any TDI form as applicable. For example, an adverse determination letter and adverse determination appeal letter both require you to include a copy of the TDI IRO form number LHL009. So make sure you include the most recent version of that form. You can find URA-related forms at our webpage from the link on the screen or from the contact page at the end of this webinar. For adverse determination template letter requirements, you may refer to our sample letters that are also found at our forms page. However, remember that the sample letters are only examples. So you must refer to the most current statutes and rules to make sure you are capturing all requirements correctly. If you have questions related to URA applications or requirements, there are several ways to contact us. First, you will find helpful information at our URA webpage at the link on the screen, including links to forms and requirements. For general questions, which are not related to a specific application you filed with us, you may email us at our general email box above. A subject matter expert will respond to you within 1 business day. When you send us a URA application, it will be assigned to a designated analyst within 10 business days, and that analyst will reach out to you via email with feedback. If you have questions about that specific application during the time it is under review, email your designated analyst you are working with for that application. You may also call us at 512-676-6400 or toll-free at 866-554-4926. Please remember that TDI staff is not allowed to make assumptions about application content, answer hypothetical questions, or provide business or legal advice. However, we will always do our best to guide you to the applicable requirements based on the information available in your inquiry or documentation. This is why there may be times when we must ask you to repeat something or clarify something that seems obvious to get absolute clarity, or we may not be able to provide the exact answer you're hoping for, but we will point you to the requirements as best as we can, and we can also provide examples in some cases. So how do you submit URA applications? Online or electronically is the most efficient method. Instructions for each application type can be found from our webpage, which we will provide a link to at the end of the webinar. Please note these tips about our online application email receiver. It is a secure method, but cannot receive encrypted or password-protected emails. So, if you must send securely, send to our general mailbox instead. It does not provide acknowledgement of receipt. However, once an application is assigned, your analyst will provide feedback to you. It is also dedicated to applications only, so please direct any inquiries to our general email box instead. You may also mail your application to the address listed at the end of this webinar. We do ask that you do not use different addresses when mailing, alter the mailing address in any way, or make to the attention of an individual, as that can cause delay in routing and processing. It is also best to send your applicable fee with the application exhibits, but if you must send the fee separately, make sure you include a cover letter with reference to the URA name and license number, and explain what the fee is for and the date the separate application exhibits were sent. This concludes our presentation for Utilization Review application tips, and thank you again so much for joining us today. Please let us know if you have any questions, and for those that we don't get a chance to answer today, you may reach out to us via email at uragrp@tdi.texas.gov or via phone at 512-676-6400 or toll-free at 866-554-4926.
All right. Well, there's some good information on that last slide for sure. Some places to contact for more questions, but we're going to try to answer a few of them right now. So welcome to the Q&A portion of the webinar. Elizabeth, if you can turn on your camera and unmute your microphone. All right.
Good afternoon,
Joining
everyone.
us to take your questions is our presenter, Elizabeth Clark. Elizabeth's the manager of the URA agent and IRO applications team. They're responsible for licensing and regulatory oversight of URAs and IROs. And they also help review rules if they come up in new legislation. They'll look at your open records requests, reporting, and Special projects, other duties as assigned. So before we get going, just a couple of ground rules I need to pass along. Any questions about a specific situation you're having or a specific company, probably not going to be able to answer in this forum, but you can always email those questions to that email mentioned earlier, URAGRP at tdi.texas.gov. Kind of think about it like URA group. Um, I believe you'll also find that address in the chat several times, and I'll repeat it before we wrap up. So please use the Q&A feature if you have a question for us today. We've already got several lined up, and any that we don't get to today, send us through the email and we'll try to get you that answer. Okay, Elizabeth, you ready to take some questions?
I am. Got
All
some
right,
great
sounds good.
questions I see coming over here.
Yes, very detailed stuff. All
Yeah.
right, first up, can an entity apply for a URA license even if it doesn't currently serve health plans that TDI regulates? In our particular case, we do have some Medicare plans right now, but we're thinking about adding commercial plans later in the year. Can we go ahead and apply before we have commercial contracts?
Yes, that's actually a great question, and we do actually have some URAs in existence today that applies to. You are absolutely able to apply for that license, but some things to remember are that you will have to show compliance. We will expect you to actually show that same evidence of compliance. By submitting all of those required exhibits and attachments that you see linked in that application form. And then to expound on that, you will still have to maintain that compliance. So, in other words, even though you don't intend to practice, in practical application possibly for a while, you will still be required to submit your renewal applications every 2 years if you choose to hold the license that long. You will still be required to report material changes. So, and one of the most common examples of material changes, just to get into that a little bit, is if your officers and directors change. If that changes, you would still have to report that to us. But that's a great question.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Next up, this one says, we're a Texas URA, and I know we need to renew. We're going to do that for the first time this year. I've already been to your online resource page, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to put for the resident state. Is that where I am or where the URA is headquartered?
So it is essentially your state of domicile. And to take that a little bit further, the way that you can easily know what we're looking for is if you look at that URA application form, that TDI form number LHL 005, it's going to be the business address. You're going to see on the front page there's a business address, and then right under that, there's a mailing address. So we consider the state in that business address as your domicile state. So if you're in Texas, you're resident.
All right, sounds good. Another renewal question. We are renewing our URA license. Are we going to get a paper copy at some point with the new expiration dates? Do we get that in the mail?
So you're not going to get it in the mail. We're trying to embrace the electronic in all things and save that
Paperless.
paper, as most of us are these days, as much as we can. However, we are going to give you a copy of that. We will be essentially emailing that to you, and then, of course, if you choose to print it, you can from there.
Sounds good. Go get it framed. Um, Last one here. We've had a change in one of our organization's officers. This is what you mentioned just a little bit ago. I know we need to do an update. Can we use a different fingerprinting service that we have locally instead of the one you mentioned, Identigo?
No, unfortunately, that is, actually a contract, and there are specific administrative and technical things that Identico provides for, TDI as in respect to that process. So, unfortunately, we do expect you to use Identico. But my understanding is that there's quite a few Identico locations available, so you should be able to find one. And you can always reach out to us if you have questions about that. We'll be happy to help.
All right, sounds good.
Mhm.
We have a couple on this question, so probably combine them. Are minor changes to, say, a template letter considered material change requiring a new submission to TDI? We also had one down the list that says, can you please define what a material change is? So both of those.
Yes, those are both great questions, very good questions. So, bear with me just a second.
What's the material
So the
change?
material change, let's start with that. Well, actually, let me start with the minor changes. Yes. To answer that one right off. And the main reason for that is because what one person might think is a minor non-substantive change, someone else might not, think that is a minor. And you'd be surprised how some of these seemingly minor changes can actually change context. Sometimes even when it's a matter of formatting, it can change, the clarity of that content. So, as kind of a compromise, if there's ever a question where you think, wow, this just seems so extremely minor, you can
Mhm.
always reach out to us and
Mhm.
provide an example, and we
Show
can
it to
kind of
us.
get into that case by case. And then to define material change, that's a great question because you don't actually see the definition of material change in our, definitions per se, but it is actually implied in the rules. And essentially what that is anything that has changed within your license since you reported that original application or subsequent applications. So essentially, good examples are going to be, again, officers, directors, changes to policies and procedures that you previously submitted to us, changes to your adverse determination notices, business address change, contact changes, your URA contact, phone numbers, things like that. All of those would be material changes. And again, always, if you're questioning, we are happy to help you with that. So you can reach out to us and just let us know, hey, does this count? And we can help you there.
Sounds good. Next question. How detailed do our personnel lists need to be for review staff, like our nurses per se? Previously, each one of our nurses had a little profile with their school, graduation date, and all that. Is all that necessary?
That you don't necessarily have to add, a profile or CV or anything like that. You can if you wish, but that's not required. However, we do have very specific criteria that we do require in that personnel list. And a quick way to get to that is that if you actually look at our LHL 005 form, you will see a link to that personnel list information. And there's actually a requirement within that segment of requirements there that specifies each detail.
All right, perfect. Several people have asked if this presentation is going to be available later. Yes, we are recording, and you'll get all the slides, and I'll tell you about that as soon as we're done with our other questions. Next up, does any update to a URA letter? Again, this is kind of something like we were talking about, like just a change in a phone number or changes to the appeal verbiage. Do we have to resubmit those within 30 days?
Yes, and I see this is actually a great question
Okay.
because I believe they're also asking if they can be submitted with a renewal. That is a wonderful question. I'm glad you asked that. Changes should never be submitted with a renewal application. We're actually not allowed to
Separately.
accept changes. Yes, those are supposed to be submitted separately. Renewal is just for renewing that license. The changes are to be submitted with an update application. But you are correct. Phone numbers, especially things like appeal verbiage, any of those critical things that have changed should be submitted in those update applications within 30 days of effective date.
Okay, perfect. To submit an application and documents via email, um, how do we email? Do we email to the URA GRP group, or is there another email we should be using?
So we have our IRUA IA Pro, and I think I just
Mhm.
butchered that. It's one of those where I have to see it, and I'm going
Right.
to, misspell if I don't see it right in front of me. But we have our that the one that starts with the IRU is
Mhm.
actually our dedicated applications receiver. So ideally, we always prefer you to submit those there. However, one of the distinctions between that applications receiver and our general email box, which is the URA GRP,
Mhm.
is that the URA GRP can receive secure emails,
Okay.
whereas the IRU cannot. So if your organization does require you to submit securely with encryption, et cetera, you can send it to the URA group. But otherwise, and just know too that the other one, both of them are secure. It's just a matter of what your organization, requires you to do. But both of those can be used.
Okay. Sounds good. Still got a few more. Elizabeth, did I understand correctly that all attachments, exhibits should be kept separate to upload and submit each document one at a time rather than one long PDF with bookmarks? Is that correct?
You can do the name of the game here is we want to make sure that each file is separately that we are
Distinct?
able to access, yes, that it's distinct and we are able to access it separately and that it's named separately. And that's for our ability to be able to organize that because there may be certain things within that application that we have to supersede that are not going to be approved. So we need to be able to easily manipulate those. I believe the PDF with bookmarks is okay, because I think we can
Work with that?
access those in that fashion. And the other thing too is that if you do all the separate files, you can zip them as well if that's easier, because we know sometimes space can be an issue.
Mhm. And some people have restrictions on how large their attachments can be as well.
Right.
Next up, do our letters need to be redlined? I'm not sure what she means there.
I do, and that's a great question too.
Okay, that's why
That's
you're here.
perfect. That's right. We know all about redlining, and the answer is yes. Thank you so much for asking that question. And essentially, what we're talking about by redlining is essentially using track changes. And what that does is it allows us to easily see what has changed at a glance, so we can, compare that to, what any prior information was submitted to us versus what that new revision is.
All right,
Great
perfect.
questions, you guys.
Yeah, those were awesome questions. We are going to wrap it up there. We've got 2 minutes left, and I got to tell you a few more things. Um, if we didn't get your question, of course, send it to that email that we mentioned earlier, uragrp@tdi.texas.gov, and we'll try to get you an answer. Right after we're done here today, you'll be getting a short survey, just a few questions. Let us know how we did, and if you like this format for compliance or CE learning sessions. And yes, everyone, you're going to get a follow-up email in about a week that's going to have the whole recording of today's event. You can share it with your coworkers or just have it for your own reference. And it's going to have all the slides from the presentation and this Q&A discussion as well. Any resource links that might be helpful for you will include in that email as well. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we're going to see you at the next TDI InsureEd webinar.